You are the hero of your story, the one to brave the way, to risk and pave your way, the one to rise from your depths to your heights, dimensions far greater than you realize, ever thought, or were told you had. To summon the courage to live, or ease, or save your only life, for only you can. Yes, you are the hero, that heroic being, already waiting in the wings. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to the 87th show in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the bolstering coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully. Last week we moved through all kinds of light and dark and shadow, inside and out, within our beings, infusing our days and nights, our experiences, emanating from the natural world, from the mystery and beauty they bring to the moods and contrasts they create. This week, a turn through places and essences of hope, doubt, and courage, a theme suggested and encouraged by a regular listener who felt some exploring and nourishing of these dimensions in these greatly challenging times of ours would be fitting and widely welcome. Yes. So, let's go there together through a pairing up, a puzzling out of cultural commentary, inquiry, and poetry. I thought we might begin with some words from Václav Havel, who from his book from 1990, Disturbing the Peace. You know, if you don't know, he was a dissident and once president of Czechoslovakia. And this book was timeless insights into the inner life and civic purpose of hope. He was, as you may or may not know, imprisoned a number of times for upholding his ideals of justice and humanism and his insistence on anti-consumerism and environmental responsibility. And he, like Viktor Frankl, knew the value of hope with visceral intimacy, not as an intellectual pretension or spiritual delusion, but as a lifeline of sanity and survival for the individual as well as for the constellation of individuals we call society. Here's what he said in that book. The kind of hope I often think about, especially in situations that are particularly hopeless, such as prison, I understand above all as a state of mind, not a state of the world. Either we have hope within us or we don't. It is a dimension of the soul. It's not essentially dependent on some particular observation of the world or estimate of the situation. It's not prognostication. It's an orientation of the spirit, an orientation of the heart. It transcends the world that is immediately experienced, and it is anchored somewhere beyond its horizons. Hope in this deep and powerful sense is not the same as joy that things are going well, or willingness to invest in enterprises that are obviously headed for early success, but rather an ability to work for something because it is good, not just because it stands a chance to succeed. The more unpropitious the situation in which we demonstrate hope, the deeper that hope is. It's definitely not the same thing as optimism. It's not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. In short, I think that the deepest and most important form of hope, the only one that can keep us above water and urge us to good works, and the only true source of the breathtaking dimension of the human spirit and its efforts, is something we get, as it were, from, quote, elsewhere. It's also this hope above all which gives us the strength to live and continually to try new things, even in conditions that seem as hopeless as ours do here and now. Thank you, Vaclav Havel. In 1962, Rachel Carson of the Silent Spring fame told the Scripps College graduates the following: "Today our whole earth has become only another shore from which we look out across the dark ocean of space, uncertain what we shall find and when we sail out among the stars. The stream of time moves forward and mankind moves with it. Your generation must come to terms with the environment. You must face realities instead of taking refuge in ignorance and evasion of truth. Yours is a grave and sobering responsibility, but it's also a shining opportunity. You go out into a world where mankind is challenged, and as it has never been challenged before, to prove its maturity and its mastery, not of nature, but of itself. Therein lies our hope and our destiny." Thank you, Rachel Carson, for those words. Carl Sandburg has this poem from 1936. Hope is a tattered flag. Hope is a tattered flag and a dream of time. Hope is a heart-spun word, the rainbow, the shad blow in white, the evening star, inviolable over the coal mines, the shimmer of northern lights across a bitter winter night, the blue hills beyond the smoke of the steelworks, the birds who go on singing to their mates in peace, war, peace, the 10-cent crocus bulb blooming in a used car sales room, the horseshoe over the door, the luck piece in the pocket, the kiss and the comforting laugh and resolve. Hope is an echo. Hope ties itself yonder, yonder. The spring grass showing itself where least expected, the rolling fluff of white clouds on a changeable sky, the broadcast of strings from Japan, bells from Moscow, of the voice of the Prime Minister of Sweden carried across the sea in behalf of a world family of nations, and children singing chorals of the Christ child, and Bach being broadcast from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and tall skyscrapers practically empty of tenants, and the hands of strong men groping for handholds, and the Salvation Army singing, "God loves us." Thank you, Carl Sandburg. Hope is a tattered flag. Well, the editors of the Poetry Foundation, where I often go to for some poems and poets, had this offering I discovered along the way on this for this show: Poems of Hope and Resilience. The words of others can help to lift us up. How can we find hope amid uncertainty, conflict, or loss? When we feel we've lost hope, we may find inspiration in the words and deeds of others. In this selection of poems, hope takes many forms: an open road, an unturned page, a map to another world, an ark, an infant, a long-lost glove that returns to its owner. Using metaphors for hope seems appropriate, as the concept of hope is difficult to describe. It's deeper than simple optimism and more mysterious, delicate, and elusive. It's a feeling we must develop and cultivate, but like faith, it's also a state with which we are graced. It can foster determination and grit, the ability to bounce back and to remain determined despite failures and setbacks when we make daily efforts to change and improve what we can control. So I just chose a couple of poems from this larger mix. This first one is Jack Gilbert's poem, Failing and Flying. Everyone forgets that Icarus also flew. It's the same when love comes to an end, or the marriage fails and people say they knew it was a mistake, that everybody said it would never work, that she was old enough to know better. But anything worth doing is worth doing badly, like being there by that summer ocean on the other side of the island while love was fading out of her, the stars burning so extravagantly those nights that anyone could tell you they would never last. Every morning she was asleep in my bed like a visitation, the gentleness in her like antelope standing in the dawn mist. Each afternoon I watched her coming back through the hot stony field after swimming, the sea light behind her and the huge sky on the other side of that. Listened to her while we ate lunch. How can they say the marriage failed? Like the people who came back from Provence, when it was Provence, and said it was pretty but the food was greasy. I believe Icarus was not failing as he fell, but just coming to the end of his triumph. Thank you, Jack Gilbert. And William Stafford has this poem, A Ritual to Read to Each Other. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade, holding each elephant's tail, but if one wanders the circus, won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life gets lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep. Thank you, William Stafford. And often, as those who listen in often know, a recurring source of intimate insight and inspiration is Walt Whitman. And here's just the very opening of his Song of the Open Road. Afoot and light-hearted, I take to the open road, healthy, free, the world before me, the long brown path before me, leading wherever I choose. Henceforth I ask not good fortune. I myself am good fortune. Henceforth I whimper no more, postpone no more, need nothing. Done with indoor complaints, libraries, querulous criticisms, strong and content, I travel the open road. The earth, that is sufficient. I do not want the constellations any nearer. I know they are very well where they are. I know they suffice for those who belong to them. Still here I carry my old delicious burdens. I carry them, men and women. I carry them with me wherever I go. I swear it is impossible for me to get rid of them. I am filled with them, and I will fill them in return. Thank you, Walt Whitman, Song of the Open Road. It's a much longer piece, and you might enjoy it. Well, in honor of the very soon arriving winter solstice, next week here in this part of the world, and the arriving winter time, and the faithfulness of nature always gives me hope. Actually, it inspirits me in many ways. This is a poem for the winter solstice. It's called As Above and Below. As the sun and gyring heavens, the ancient constellations above, balance with the turning earth, this terra firma we call home, below. Maybe, in their solstice pausing and stilling, we can find our own place and peace of balance between them and within. Feel the deeper harmony of our being, our equally remarkable and faithful natures. Welcome this season of our life, the rhyme of our living, and a sense of our next unfoldings, whatever they may be, however clear or mysterious, as we follow through all familiar and unknown bareness, darkness, the light of our own bright gathered inner stars. Spread the warmth of the truest, tenderest parts of our hearts. Lean into the comforting grounding of our earthly bodies as we wayfare out, singly and together, toward more sun-long days, gentle springs, and footloose, time-soft summers. As above and below. From ideas.ted.com, it's as the TED conferences, TED Talks, we humans on how to be more hopeful. TED speakers show how to nudge yourself toward the sunny side. We all go through times when we see the world through cloudy colored glasses, times when it's tempting to just climb into bed or bathtub and hide out, maybe for up to a month. Fortunately for your loved ones, your livelihood, and your life, we've gathered together some tactics from TED speakers to cut through the fog. I'll give you a few of their thoughts. Shift your expectations. Lean into what cognitive neuroscientist Tali Sharot calls our, quote, optimism bias. Optimism changes subjective reality. Recognize you can change your life at any point. Do you feel it's hard to look forward to the future because it seems all too predictable? Well, you could resign yourself to the inevitable, and while you're at it, why not pick out the inscription for your tombstone? Or, choice 2, open yourself up to the possibilities that exist for everyone at every age. Look for meaning in the most challenging moments. Avoidance and endurance can be the entryway to forging meaning, says Andrew Solomon, who transformed his own childhood of bullying and emotional torment into a life of helping others communicate their own stories of growth. His advice was, you need to take the traumas and make them part of who you've come to be, and fold the worst events of your life into a narrative of triumph, evincing a better self in response to things that hurt. Listen to another person's story. When you're feeling down, it can help to get you out of your own head. This week, make it a point to ask someone, a family member, friend, or stranger, to tell you a story about a meaningful time in their life. Listen deeply, intentionally. Return to your home base. And they reference Elizabeth Gilbert, the author, who, after Eat, Pray, Love, the great, very super successful book, at least best-selling book, released another one and it bombed. And so she realized a lot of things. To her, the home base is the act of writing itself, not getting good reviews, watching your books become bestsellers, or selling movie rights. So how can you find your own center amid life's Sturm und Drang? Identify the things or thing that in this world that you love more than you love yourself, she says. That might be creativity, it might be family, or invention, or adventure, or faith, or service. It might be raising corgis. Like that. Add some wow to your world. And remember the essential goodness of humanity, says Mary Latham. There's an unfathomable amount of kindness that I have seen, she says, and when we put our fears aside, when we connect to strangers, when we smile at the people next to us, or put away our judgments, it opens up a door into an entirely different way of life. So there you are, a few thoughts from the TED Talkers. Which brings me to Rebecca Solnit, the writer I've quoted a few times for different reasons, different themes, different programs. It's important to say what hope is not. It's not the belief that everything was, is, or will be fine. The evidence is all around us of tremendous suffering and tremendous destruction. The hope I'm interested in is about broad perspectives with specific possibilities. Ones that invite or demand that we act. It's also not a sunny everything is getting better narrative, though it may be a counter to the everything is getting worse narrative. You could call it an account of complexities and uncertainties with openings. Hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. When you recognize uncertainty, you recognize that you may be able to influence the outcomes, you alone, or you in concert with a few dozen or several million others. It's an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. It's the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who and what it may impact are not things we can know beforehand. We may not, in fact, know them afterward either, but they matter all the same, and history's full of people whose influence was most powerful after they were gone. Thank you, Rebecca Solnit. And, we're talking on our theme, our interrelated themes are, hope, doubt, and courage. And doubt is obviously in some ways vital. It's essential. We actually do need to have that sort of, I call it healthy skepticism. But in other ways, it, of course, can be disturbing and derailing and disabling. Well, that brought me to Rudyard Kipling's great poem, If, which speaks to some of this. So I'll share that now. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose, and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there's nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Thank you, Rudyard Kipling, for that timeless piece. Well, dear listeners, what are you feeling greatly hopeful about right now? Where is your hope failing or flagging, in need of shoring up? Where are you doubting, being healthily skeptical in wise ways, needed ways, and critically questioning? And where is your doubt a disservice to your well-being, doing you in on some level? How are you summoning your inner courage, the inner fortitude we all have, but may not know we have, to face whatever life music you're facing? Questions to ask yourselves, if you like, to contemplate. I went to the Marginalian for some things this time around, and Diane Ackerman spoke about what working at a suicide prevention hotline taught her about resilience. The book of hers is A Slender Thread, Rediscovering Hope at the Heart of Crisis. We use only a voice and a set of ears somehow tied to the heart and brain, but it feels like mountaineering with someone who has fallen, a dangling person whose hands you are gripping on your own. Choice is a signature of our species. We choose to live. Sometimes we choose our own death, but most of the time we make choices just to prove choice is possible. Above all else, we value the right to choose one's destiny. People take our lives in their hands all the time. Parents, mentors, lovers, teachers, patrons. How often do they hear from us? I have a poem for the soul when I was in a place of great loss some years back, and where that led. It's called Losing the Flow. Losing the flow. For one who bathed body and spirit in its free-form currents, breathed in it, in its fresh rushings, who lived and fished, loved and dreamt for lyrical years along its soft green banks, losing the flow, the natural course, wild coursing of a great river, comes as a bewildering surprise. You watch, amazed, dazed, as the water recedes. Then how you begin to devitalize like the earth before you that dries and cracks. Witness the water flowers wither, the birds and fish disappear, taking their bright songs and buoyant gestures with them. Feel a gnawing, dispiriting take hold, a growing emptiness you can't reverse. Experience your once flush, daily quenched feelings of desire, delight, wane, drain away, like the whole vanishing river. You hang on, try to, for a time, caught in the loss, held in a hard press of longing, disbelieving, until the last remaining hope of this dear river's return evaporates. And you gather your parched, puzzled self and depart to seek out a new oasis, a life-giving source of another, even if lesser kind, to flow through the next seasons of your life, to keep your body, your soul, likewise vitally streaming and ever moving, ever dreaming toward the sea. Here's another for you. It's a life reminder, I suppose I could call it, of mine, but for each and all of us, and myself. Blood freezes at -3 Celsius. Tears freeze at -30 Fahrenheit. Everything freezes except the spirit, which never freezes, never hardens, never deadens or ages, no matter the depth of our winters, the sudden plunge of our emotional temperatures, or the sometime extreme coldness, seeming frozenness of the world around us. David White has a poem, The True Love, that speaks to me and maybe you about the vital love of self. Well, you'll see what it says to you. Here it is, the true love, one word. There is a faith in loving fiercely, the one who is rightfully yours, especially if you have waited years, and especially if part of you never believed you could deserve this loved and beckoning hand held out to you this way. I am thinking of faith now, and the testaments of loneliness and what we feel we are worthy of in this world. Years ago in the Hebrides, I remember an old man who walked every morning on the gray stones to the shore of the baying seals, who would press his hat to his chest in the blustering salt wind and say his prayer to the turbulent Jesus hidden in the water. And I think of the story of the storm, and everyone waking and seeing the distant yet familiar figure far across the water calling to them, and how we are all preparing for that abrupt waking and that calling and that moment we have to say yes, except it will not come so grandly, so biblically, but more subtly and intimately in the face of the one you know you have to love, so that when we finally step out of the boat toward them, we find everything holds us and confirms our courage. And if you wanted to drown, you could, but you don't, because finally, after all the struggle and all the years, you don't want to anymore. You've simply had enough of drowning, and you want to live, and you want to love, and you will walk across any territory and any darkness, however fluid and however dangerous, to take the one hand you know belongs in yours. The true love. Thank you, David White, for that. Also from the Marginalian, the musician Ben Folds, Folds, on empathy, creativity, and the courage to know yourself. His book is A Dream About Lightning Bugs, A Life of Music and Cheap Lessons. Lovely book. In there he wrote, as we speed past moments in a day, we want to give form to what we feel, what was obvious but got lost in the shuffle. We want to know that someone else noticed that shape we suspected was hovering just beyond our periphery. And we want that shape, that flicker of shared life experience, captured in a bottle, playing up on a big screen, gracing our living room wall, or singing to us from a speaker. It reminds us where we've been, what we have felt, who we are, and why we're here. We all see something blinking in the sky at some point, but it's a damn lot of work to put it in the bottle. Maybe that's why only some of us become artists. Because we're obsessive enough, idealistic enough, disciplined enough, or childish enough to wade through whatever's necessary, dedicating life to the search for these elusive flickers above all else. Thank you, Ben Folds. A Rainbow appears as a poem of mine for you that I hope offers a ray of hopefulness in where you might be right now and in need of a rainbow of a kind, or a ray of hopefulness. A rainbow appears in your sky, filling you with many-colored hopes that recovery from hard-labored times is near at hand, inspiring you to let the simple wonder of it all keep prisming in, brightening your horizon line. Here's to the rainbows. Self-reliance sprang to mind, no surprise in my curating for us. Most famous for that is from 1836 to 1837, Ralph Waldo Emerson put forth a series of lectures on the philosophy of history at Boston's Masonic Temple. This is from Wikipedia. They were never published separately, but many were later used in Self-Reliance and several other essays. It's the book of his. And I just thought, well, maybe one or two excerpts from that, from 1841. Man is his own star, and the soul that can render an honest and a perfect man commands all light, all influence, all fate. Nothing to him falls early or too late. Our acts are our angels are, or good or ill, our fatal shadows that walk by us still. It's easy to see that a greater self-reliance must work a revolution in all the offices and relations of men, in their religion, in their education, in their pursuits, their modes of living, their association, in their property, in their speculative views. Thank you, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And self-reliance, I also thought, well, one of the most self-reliant people I ever, and resilient fellows and courageous people is Jack London. What an incredible life he lived. And there were two things he said that I thought were relevant for us. We are realities in a real world, he said in 1910, and we must accept the reality of our nature in all its thrillableness if we're to live in accord with the real world. And those who try to get away from these realities, who by ukase of the will deny their existence, succeed only in living in a world of illusion and misunderstanding. And in 1899, I don't care if the whole present, all I possess, were swept away from me. I will build a new present. If I am left naked and hungry tomorrow, before I give in, I will go on naked and hungry. But that. You may or may not be familiar with Nicholas Taleb's book that I'm absolutely fascinated by, and I think so helpful in so many ways. If you were to read it, you might glean some of the things I did. It's this is from a review about it. It's one of the most thought-provoking books of recent times and brutally challenges conventional wisdom, our biases, and our view of the world. I promise, says the reviewer, you won't look at academics, doctors, managers, Uber drivers, and many others the same way. This book provides you with new lenses to view the world. Open your eyes and see the world of volatility, disordered uncertainty, and randomness in a new light, and use it to change yourself and the world around you. So in the author's own words, I will produce, he said, a small number of tricks, directives, and interdicts, how to live in a world we don't understand, or rather how not to be afraid to work with things we patently don't understand, and more principally, in what manner we should work with these. Wind extinguishes a candle and energizes fire. You want to be the fire and wish for the wind. So just to sort of sum it up here in this review, it says, anti-fragility is beyond resilience or robustness. The resilient resists shocks and stays the same, but the anti-fragile gets better. It determines the boundary between what is living and organic. It loves randomness and uncertainty. It loves errors, a certain class of errors. It allows us to deal with the unknown, to do things without understanding them, and do them well. By grasping the mechanisms of anti-fragility, we can build a systematic and broad guide to non-predictive decision-making under uncertainty in business, politics, medicine, and life in general, anywhere. Wow, so working with the volatility and the uncertainty, how about that? Definitely worth a read, for some of you anyway. Okay, on we go. A poem by Marge Piercy, To Be of Use. The people I love the best jump into work head first without dallying in the shallows and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again and again. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud, Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil. Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. Thank you, Marge Piercy. I didn't know about her before. The hero is a character brought to life, among others, in my one-man experiential show of theater on paper. That was called Behind the Curtain. And this is his story poem, The Hero. Has saved many days, many lives, including his own. Has served only as a defender, never an aggressor. Of the right to live in peacefulness, which has meant battling opposing forces, or many a field of darkness, on many a field of darkness. Theaters of war in his outer world, theaters of conflict within himself, but always with great virtue, always with great valor, without falling, ever deserving of a hero's welcome. Psychology Today, the attributes of courage, some quotes and exercises, and I thought there were a couple of good quotes in here. Nelson Mandela, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Soren Kierkegaard, to dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. To not dare is to lose oneself. Mark Twain, it is not the size of the dog in the fight, it is the size of the fight in the dog. Like that one. And two last ones. Robert F. Kennedy. This world demands the qualities of youth, not a time of life, but a state of mind, a temper of the will, a quality of the imagination, a predominance of courage over timidity, of the appetite for adventure over the life of ease. And Aristotle. The ideal man bears the accidents of life with dignity and grace, making the best of circumstances. So I thought earlier of Kipling, and I thought then that there was the poem that you will know, but by a poet that almost nobody knows by his name, but they know the poem. His name was William Henley, William Ernest Henley, from the 1840s. He died like 1903, and he was friends with Robert Louis Stevenson. His poem is Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Thank you, Mr. Henley, for that one. Wonderful. All right, we go on. Theodore Roosevelt was strong about the cowardice of cynicism and the courage to create rather than tear down. He said the poorest way to face life is to face it with a sneer. There are many men who feel a kind of twisted pride in cynicism. There are many who confine themselves to criticism of the way others do what they themselves dare not even attempt. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. There's little use for the being whose tepid soul knows nothing of great and generous emotion, or the high pride, the stern belief, the lofty enthusiasm of the men who quell the storm and ride the thunder. Love that. Thank you, Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, just keeping our eye on time. I'd love to get through all that. I have so many lovely things. We'll see if I can get through them with you, or to them with you. Rebecca Solnit once more on believes in breaking silence as our mightiest weapon against oppression. The book is the mother of all questions. She says, we are our stories, stories that can be both prison and the crowbar to break open the door of that prison. Sometimes just being able to speak, to be heard, to be believed are crucial parts of membership in a family, a community, a society. Sometimes our voices break those things apart. Sometimes those things are prisons. And then when words break through unspeakability, what was tolerated by a society sometimes becomes intolerable. Even those who have been audible have often earned the privilege through strategic silences or the inability to hear certain voices, including their own. The struggle of liberation has been in part to create the conditions for the formerly silenced to speak and be heard. Silence and shame are contagious, so are courage and speech. Even now, when women begin to speak of their experience, others step forward to bolster the earlier speaker and to share their own experience. A brick is knocked loose, another one, a dam breaks. The waters rush forth. Thank you, Rebecca Solnit. Peace of mind, I felt apropos open and closed. The point we stop being wide open, one with the other, cease being fully present when we are together, trade off faith for saving face, or fear of facing self, truths, unknowns, is when the door of possibility closes, if not loudly, always, always, sadly. And another for these times that we're in, together in a way, we're all in it together, in some certainly felt way or actual way. The branch and the bridge. Hold out an olive branch, invoking peace, a new green leaf, inviting possibility, a heart of empathy, humility, and a spirit of affinity, infinity. With these offerings, more understandings, above all, hold out a hand of friendship, soulship, and harmony, and a hope for a bridge we can arch across together. Jim Harrison. Poem is called Becoming. Nowhere is it the same place as yesterday. None of us is the same person as yesterday. We finally die from the exhaustion of becoming. This downward cellular jubilance is shared by the wind, bugs, birds, bears, and rivers, and perhaps the black holes in galactic space where our souls will all be gathered in an invisible thimble of antimatter. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Yes, trees wear out as the wattles under my chin grow. The wrinkled hands that tried to strangle a wife-beater in New York City in 1957. We whirl with the earth, catching our breath as someone else, our soft brains ill-trained except to watch ourselves disappear into the distance. Still, we love to make music of this puzzle. Thank you, Jim Harrison, for that. Barbara Rass, R-A-S, has this poem, You Can't Have It All. But you can have the fig tree and its fat leaves like clown hands gloved with green. You can have the touch of a single 11-year-old finger on your cheek, waking you at 1 a.m. to say the hamster is back. You can have the purr of the cat and the soulful look of the black dog, the look that says, if I could, I would bite every sorrow until it fled. And when it is August, you can have it, August and abundantly so. You can have love, though often it will be mysterious, like the white foam that bubbles up at the top of the bean pot over the red kidneys until you realize foam's twin is blood. You can have the skin at the center between a man's legs, so solid, so doll-like. You can have the life of the mind, glowing, occasionally in priestly vestments, never admitting pettiness, never stooping to bribe the sullen guard who'll tell you all roads narrow at the border. You can speak a foreign language sometimes, and it can mean something. You can visit the marker on the grave where your father wept openly. You can't bring back the dead, but you can have the words forgive and forget hold hands, as if they meant to spend a lifetime together. And you can be grateful for makeup, the way it kisses your face, half spice, half amnesia. Grateful for Mozart, his many notes racing one another toward joy. For towels sucking up in the drops in your clean skin, and for deeper thirsts, for passion fruit, for saliva. You can have the dream of Egypt, the horses of Egypt, and you riding in the hot sand. You can have your grandfather sitting on the side of your bed, at least for a while. You can have clouds and letters, the leaping of distances, and Indian food with yellow sauce like sunrise. You can't count on grace to pick you out of a crowd. But here is your friend to teach you how to high jump, how to throw yourself over the bar backwards until you learn about love, about sweet surrender. And here are periwinkles, buses that kneel, farms in the mind as real as Africa. And when adulthood fails you, you can still summon the memory of the black swan on the pond of your childhood, the rye bread with peanut butter and bananas your grandmother gave you while the rest of the family slept. There is the voice you can still summon at will, like your mother's. It will always whisper, you can't have it all. But there is this. Thank you, Barbara Rass. It was lovely. Because the spirit never ages, one of mine, the joys of life are edgeless, ageless. Out of every boundedness, they flow with ease, with light and sound, color and consciousness. When you can awake each day with spirit, bring to your day a lively eye, a lively heart, a lively mind. Engage and behold the wonders, great and small, old and new, the everywhere beauty, innocence, serendipity. From the wild green majesty of a forest to the wild blue bounty of an ocean, the wild white poetry and purity of snow-capped mountains, when you can rise and breathe in the fresh air of possibility for deep feeling, holy loving, inner peace and outer harmony. Whoever and wherever you are, however long you've lived or may be living in the world, because the spirit never grows old, despite the body's waxing and waning, never fades or slows, only shines, sings forth readily, only flows timelessly, freely, and ever joyfully upon your inviting, upon your allowing. Friedrich Nietzsche said, what makes heroic? To face simultaneously one's greatest suffering and one's highest hope. I wrote this poem for Memorial Day. It's called A Day to Remember, a couple of years back, but it's really more expansive because it includes all those who've endured trials and tribulations. A day to remember. Yes, those who died serving their country, but maybe too those who fought valiantly for their own lives, on their own lines of fire, on fields of grave illnesses, fierce divorces, falling fortunes, who entered their fray, brave or scared, who suffered, sometimes greatly, were wounded, sometimes fatally, survived but scarred deeply, emotionally. People known to us and unknown, all worthy, not solely of our remembering, but also of our silent and spoken honoring, for the courage they summoned in the face of the fearful, the belief in self and the power of possibility they called on or discovered. These unsung, we can choose to remember, can raise a thought, a glass, a large feeling flag of heart to this day. The great anthropologist Margaret Mead never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Okay, we're coming to the last few things here, the last handful of things anyway. There's a book, The Impossible Will Take a Little While, Perseverance and Hope in Troubled Times. It's a meditation on anchoring our humanity in troubled times, and I know we certainly are in some of them right now. So it's a worthwhile read. It's a collection of reflections from people like Pablo Neruda to Bill Moyers, and it's curated by Paul Loeb, and so I just wanted to pull out two things from there, basically. Once you have glimpsed the world as it might be, as it ought to be, as is going to be, however that vision appears to you, it's impossible to live compliant and complacent anymore in the world as it is. And so you come out and walk out and march the way a flower comes out and blooms because it has no other calling. It has no other work. There's something for all of us there, I think. Whatever our vocation, we stand beckoning and calling, singing and shouting, planted at the gates of hope. This world and our people are beautiful and broken, and we are called to raise that up, to bear witness to the possibility of living with the dignity, bravery, and gladness that befits a human being. That may be what it is to, quote, live our mission, which is to plant ourselves at the gates of hope, not the prudent gates of optimism, which are somewhat narrower, or the boring gates of common sense, or the strident gates of self-righteousness, or the flimsy garden gate of everything is going to be all right, but a different, sometimes lonely place of truth-telling about your own soul first of all and its condition, the place of resistance and defiance, the piece of ground from which you see the world both as it is and as it could be, as it will be, from which you glimpse not only struggle but joy in the struggle. And we stand there beckoning and calling, telling people what we are seeing, asking people what they see. Ralph Waldo Emerson one more time. Finish every day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities no doubt crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. You shall begin it well and serenely, and with too high a spirit to be cumbered with your old nonsense. E.B. White, back in 1973, when he was 74 years old, wrote this letter to someone, Mr. Nadeau. It's a celebration of the human spirit, and I think we need to celebrate our human spirits more than ever right now. Dear Mr. Nadeau, as long as there is one upright man, as long as there is one compassionate woman, the contagion may spread, and the scene is not desolate. Hope is the thing that is left to us in a bad time. I shall get up Sunday morning and wind the clock as a contribution to order and steadfastness. Sailors have an expression about the weather. They say the weather is a great bluffer. I guess the same is true of our human society. Things can look dark, then a break shows in the clouds, and all is changed, sometimes rather suddenly. It's quite obvious that the human race has made a queer mess of life on this planet, but as a people we probably harbor seeds of goodness that have lain for a long time waiting to sprout when the conditions are right. Man's curiosity, his relentlessness, his inventiveness, his ingenuity have led him into deep trouble. We can only hope that these same traits will enable him to claw his way out. Hang onto your hat, hang onto your hope, and wind the clock, for tomorrow is another day. Sincerely, E.B. White. Okay, well, I wanted to read Maya Angelou's poem, but I don't think we're going to be able to do that and keep in time I want to keep in, so I'm just going to point you to it. It's a wonderful poem, very stirring. It's called A Brave and Startling Truth, Maya Angelou. So have a look at that when you have a chance. I just want to end with a few last pieces here. 3 things, if I can. Miracles by Walt Whitman. Why? Who makes much of a miracle? As to me, I know of nothing else but miracles, whether I walk the streets of Manhattan, or dart my sight over the roofs of houses toward the sky, or wade with naked feet along the beach just in the edge of the water, or stand under trees in the woods, or talk by day with anyone I love, or sleep in the bed at night with anyone I love, or sit at table at dinner with the rest, or look at strangers opposite me riding in the car, or watch honeybees busy around the hive of a summer forenoon, or animals feeding in the fields, or birds, or the wonderfulness of insects in the air, or the wonderfulness of the sundown, or of stars shining so quiet and bright, or the exquisite, delicate, thin curve of the new moon in spring. These with the rest, one and all, are to me miracles, the whole referring, yet each distinct and in its place. To me every hour of the light and dark is a miracle. Every cubic inch of space is a miracle. Every square yard of the surface of the earth is spread with the same. Every foot of the interior swarms with the same. To me the sea is a continual miracle. The fishes that swim, the rocks, the motion of the waves, the ships with men in them. What stranger miracles are there? Thank you. Walt Whitman, always. Okay, next to last, Max Ehrmann, E-H-R-M-A-N-N, Desiderata. Go placidly amid the noise and haste, And remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even the dull and the ignorant. They too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexations to the spirit. If you compare yourself with others, you may become vain and bitter, for always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself. Especially do not feign affection, neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune, but do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here, and whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be, and whatever your labors and aspirations. In the noisy confusion of life, keep peace with your soul. With all its sham drudgery and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful. Strive to be happy. Thank you, Max Ehrmann. And finally, for now, never doubt your gifts, your greatness, your innocence, your positivity, your possibility. For you can flow with such light, overflow with such joy, become ever more vital in the world. Thank you again, each and all, for leaning in, for floating and feeling in today. If you have a question, comment, or kudos, send me a note. My email is colin@thepoetorialist.com. If you'd like to show your thanks with a donation, that'd be altogether welcome and extremely helpful. You can contribute by PayPal or Venmo or directly through my site, thepoetorialist.com, or by mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island 02891. If you might like to host me for a given time on a given property as a working poet in residence to bring forth a new flight of poetic art and dedicate it to you, please reach out and we'll explore the possibilities. I also seek fellow artists to collaborate with on projects musical to theatrical, including working with composers on scoring selected poems of mine and poetically narrating productions for others. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online, on YouTube, on the Floating Poetry playlist, and soon all past and new shows on Spotify, Google, Anchor.fm, and elsewhere. I hope you'll lean in soon again. Next week, Christmas week, after 87 shows straight as of today, I'll be taking a pause, December 21st, and resume again on Wednesday the 28th. Until then, dear listeners, here's to sitting with and sorting clearly, sensibly, intuitively through your doubts, the kinds that serve you and the kinds that don't, and summoning all the hopefulness and courage necessary to meet your days and particular challenges now and ahead. Goodbye for now, and good spirits.